And we're talking about links to Washington Times articles and other, reputable news sources, not, blog sources or anything like that. This is all documented. DeCamp began to investigate, and Senator DeCamp found to his horror that these allegations were true, that these were credible.
Exactly. This is a man who really did go in with the intention of, A, finding the truth, but B, expecting that truth to be that it was untrue.
This is just, when you hear about this story, when I heard about this story, I thought there's just no way. This is, again, another smear campaign that's being directed at solid conservative Republicans by a radical left-wing fringe.
Exactly. At the time I lived in Nebraska, we've talked about this, there was very little information in the local press about it. You just really didn't hear any of this stuff.
Right.
Apparently it was squelched in the local press.
Well, and that's not surprising, because some of the names that were brought out in the course of this investigation were very prominent names in the Omaha area, including, and I shouldn't name names here until I look up the actual article so that I don't get this wrong, but we had some very prominent names here, including the then chief of police of the city of Omaha, a gentleman named Robert Wadman, the former publisher of the Omaha World Herald newspaper, Harold Anderson, a former vice squad officer who later went on to head the Forestry Service in Nebraska, Eugene Mahoney.
Bear in mind, by naming these names, we are not indicting them with any particular charge. We are saying their names came up.
Their names came up in
a negative way during this investigation.
Right.
And so you really should go to the links once you come listen to this. Go to the links from the website and do your own research.
And the names that I'm pulling out here are from a report that was written by a gentleman named Ted Gunderson, who was a former special agent in charge of the FBI. He was brought in to debunk John DeCamp, to show that DeCamp was way off base in making these wild allegations against these prominent citizens in and around Omaha and then in the Washington, D.C. area. And Mr. Gunderson came to believe that these charges were also true. And Ted Gunderson is now named by John DeCamp as one of his closest friends.
Absolutely.
So the reason this was squashed, you can speculate, was because the men who were named in this investigation had some clout.
Oh, yeah, and they had a lot to lose.
Right.
Things were going down in flames very quickly. This was a time when savings and loans were shutting down one after another after another. It was at about the same time, in fact, that Neil Bush was involved in the savings and loan scandal. So you saw savings and loan scandals all over the place.
Right.
And because of that, it was almost like all of that was cover for this one that was involved with this terrible child pornography ring.
Right. What happened in the course of this, in what Larry King was, alleged to have done? Children, and in fact there were 80 of them who came forward in Omaha and began to name names. After the IRS conducted a raid on the Franklin Community Credit Union, the FBI and IRS together, this was in November of '88, you were right. What happened was that 4 of the first witnesses who came out, 2 of them recanted their stories under pressure. One of them was a young man named Troy Boner. His brother was, he died allegedly of suicide after playing Russian roulette.
Yeah.
His brother told John DeCamp, Troy Boner told John DeCamp that his brother was terribly afraid of guns. Another young man named Danny King just simply disappeared. 2 others refused to recant. One named Alicia Owen, and she was convicted of perjury. She testified before a grand jury that she had been forced to have sex with the then chief of police, and based on that, she was convicted of lying and sent to prison. She later spent more time in solitary confinement than any other female prisoner in the history of the state of Nebraska on a perjury charge. And that was her first offense. Now, where does all this connect to Johnny Gosch? You may be wondering.
And why would we even bring this up now? If you don't mind, honey, let me just bring in dot number 2.
Okay.
And why we're even going back in this. Some of you may be thinking, well, this is awful, but this is then. That can't be going on now.
Right.
Another item that has been in the news recently is something that took place in the South
Yes.
And Derek knows well what I'm talking about. Why don't you tell him about it, honey?
Well, this is a story that just broke within the last couple of weeks out of Ponchatoula, Louisiana. There's a church called the Hosanna Church in Ponchatoula that's just outside of New Orleans, where 9 people have been arrested and charged with abusing children, having sex with children, having sex with animals, in the course of having satanic rituals inside the church that involved cat's blood.
Mm-hmm.
This apparently has been going on for quite some time, between 1999 and 2003. 9 people include the former pastor of the church, a gentleman named Louis LaMonica, a former sheriff's deputy in the area, and a number of other people that are connected with the Hosanna Church. Now, this is a story, again, that when you look at it from the outside is horrible, but people will tend to take these stories and kind of file them away in a mental filing cabinet as just one more case of a...
That can't happen here.
That can't happen here. These people are disturbed, and it's sick, but that's just an isolated case of very disturbed people, okay? Satanic ritual abuse of children just is not something that goes on.
Exactly.
Yeah, these people might have thought they were doing something for Satan, but it's not real. It doesn't really happen.
Now we go to dot number 3, and that takes place in the UK, where large numbers of boys, mainly from Africa, are missing.
This is a story that came out at the beginning of the month of May. And as we're going through here, I'm trying to keep up with my notes and not doing a very good job of it. But Scotland Yard admitted that in the course of investigating a really disturbing find about 5 years ago, in 2001, the torso of a young African boy was found in the Thames River, which is the river in London. All they found was the torso.
Right.
They suspected that it had something to do with a ritual sacrifice. And as part of the investigation, detectives went around to schools in the London area and asked for names of children who had just stopped coming to school. And detectives wound up with about 300 names altogether. They started trying to track down those boys to find out what had happened to them. Of the 300, and over the course of a year, they were only able to find 2. The other 298 are gone.
Right.
Generally, when they would go to the house with the address that was on file at the school, the people living there would say, he went back to Africa. And inquiries made through diplomatic channels went nowhere. They couldn't find him. But the scary thing is that detectives told the reporter from this was in the Independent, the Independent newspaper, that they suspect that the number of missing is actually in the thousands, the number of thousands per year.
So we have thousands of boys, possibly, we'll say hundreds, but possibly thousands of boys who are missing.
Yeah.
And they're tied to